is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show featuring conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and outdoor hospitality experts who share their insights to help your business succeed. Hosted by Brian Searl, the founder and CEO of Insider Perks, empowered by insights from Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. It is May 1st, 2024, which happens to be opening day for a lot of campgrounds up here in Canada. It's an exciting time. I want to thank you guys for welcoming me back to my old gig. I'm here guest hosting as Brian is away on a well-deserved vacation. And of course, the show's got to go on. Show must go on. So for those who don't know me, I'm Cara Csizmadia. I'm president of the Canadian Camping and RV Association, formerly a co-host of this show. I spent a couple of years of my life every week here having chats about the industry and getting to meet some incredible folks. All of the individuals on this call, as well as so many others. So I really cherish the show and have loved to see it continue and go on and watch every week and see how engaged and big the audience has been getting. It's really lovely to watch. So thank you all for having me back. I was mentioning to these guys before we went live here, I actually, all three of you, I had the pleasure of seeing, the last time I saw you all was all in the same place last fall at the glamping show. So it's lovely to catch up. I think we'll have potentially a couple of others jump in and join us throughout, as we're live here, but we can kind of get things kicked off and started today. But first, I will ask you guys to introduce yourselves. I know your audience here probably knows who you all are, but quick blurb from each of you would be great. Scott, we'll start with you.
Sure. I guess I could start. Scott Bahr from Cochran Consulting Group, do market research within the industry. Been doing it for 20 years and over 20 now, but we'll just keep it around 20. Yeah, love doing the research, love working with data, and that's been my focus for quite some time, and I love doing it.
Right on. And Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Hoffman from Camp Strategy. I'm one of the founding members. And we try to help campgrounds succeed by coaching through financials and operations.
Amazing. And Christine.
I'm Christine Taylor. I'm from the Town Law Firm. I grew up in the camping industry. I actually owned a campground with my mother. And I call myself the doom and gloom of the business world because I get to tell you every negative thing that's happening in our space and hopefully how to better address it.
Shame. I have to say that that's not true. As a former campground owner, I really cherished my relationship with my lawyer. So I would say, as much as it's often daunting things to deal with and chat out, very, very valuable and necessary component of the industry. So, and, I have to say, you guys are lucky down there. We really don't have the same level of access to specialists like Christine up here. We've got some great legal contacts and things like that, but to have that level of understanding and comprehension about the industry and how it functions is a really great tool for operators that we'll have up here.
I appreciate that. I'll take that to the bank. So
good. Oh, good. I'm so glad. Okay, so I think we can just kind of dive in. Probably we were tossing around some ideas. I mentioned it's the start of season up here in Canada, and that is being challenged a little by the weather. I'm actually in the midst of a snowfall warning of 30 to 50 centimeters. So gosh, what would that be? 12 to 14 inches of snow probably over the next 24 hours. So in my part of the country, opening day is proving to be a little bit cumbersome, but we certainly have campgrounds all over the country kind of geared up and doing that celebratory stuff this weekend as they get open and ready to go. I'm interested to hear from you guys about, forecasts, or, Scott, if you have any insights about data or trends or what the booking situation is looking like for this upcoming season now that we're on the precipice of it starting. I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. In some of the work we've done in the last couple months, it seems there's a growing percentage of guests who are booking their trip a little bit later or last minute. So, one of the things we're finding out is that with a lot of the disruptions that happened last year, weather. I know I probably say this every week, but last year June was essentially a washout in the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people made reservations, and up to that point had been reservations well in advance to make sure that they got their spot.
Right.
But then, so they had reservations, and especially the tent people. RVers not quite as much, but like a lot of the tenters, a lot of the places that see a lot of people, a lot of tent campers.
Okay.
They're seeing a little bit of a change where people are going to wait a little bit longer. The overcrowding has diminished,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can get spots now. So they're waiting, and I know that there's some people are concerned that the early reservations aren't there. I'm not a campground owner, so it's easy for me to say, but I feel like if we're patient, I think they'll come back. I do believe that as long as we get a break with our weather and we don't get for the snow in camping season. But yeah, the other thing that dovetails with that is the desire for more spontaneous travel. That
Right.
people, there's especially RVers, have a real strong desire to have at least part of their trip be spontaneous. It may not be every stop, but they want to incorporate some spontaneous stops along the way. Just kind of, have a destination in mind, but then stay where it's convenient and where they want to on any given night. So that's kind of what we're tracking at this point in the season so far.
Awesome. Yeah, Jeff, I'm curious about your insights. I know you were saying a couple of things earlier before we went live.
Yes. Somewhat, a lot of my clients are concerned about the same thing Scott just talked about.
Right.
And I keep trying to reassure them that the booking window seems to have narrowed
Mm-hmm.
Closer to dates of arrival. Everybody got spoiled by being booked out 2 months in advance, and it was great. But now we're getting back to what I would perceive as normal, which is generally it was a 2 to 3 week booking window in the past leading up to COVID. So I think we're getting back to that, unless you're a really, really great destination park. Maybe your booking window is further out, but right now I'm not too worried about it. I don't see a lot of price resistance because we've bumped the prices. They've had a couple years to adjust to the prices, and now as long as you keep any bumps within reason, I don't think you'll have a problem getting increases. But I don't think the days of the 40% jump are ahead of us. I think they're behind us.
That was going to be my next question: is how we think the consumer is tolerating or what their expectations are around things like dynamic pricing and that hotel style. We're seeing peak weekends being charged at a much higher rate than certain other times of the year, and all those things up here in a way that for the last couple years that we didn't prior to then. Is the consumer, in your opinion, tolerating that? I'm hearing yes.
Yeah, I believe that as we get more campgrounds that go to that style, it's going to become more and more acceptable.
Sure.
I'm still working with a lot of owners that still have one price for the whole season. And I try to convince them that they're just leaving money on the table.
Right.
So it's difficult with some of them, but it's becoming the norm through the industry. So they might as well catch up. And
do we have accurate, like measurable data we can share with them about how much money we're talking in a way that's absorbable?
I would defer that one to either Scott or even Sandy.
That was my transition. Hi, Sandy.
Yep.
How are you?
I am good. I feel a little silly today. Evidently, I clicked the wrong link, and I was sitting there just waiting on things to start. And finally, my friend who's watching messaged me and said, "Why aren't you on the podcast today?" And I'm like, "I am. I'm sitting here."
Well,
So
welcome. I'm glad you made it.
I apologize for being late. Yes, it is very difficult for the privately owned, what I like to refer as mom and pop parks, to think about doing dynamic pricing. But it's also, on the flip side, concerning to them. They feel like they need to be able to compete with what some newer parks are offering. And there's this balance. And what I tell them is, if the average park is 100 sites, if you just increase your rate by $1 per site, the potential is $3,000 a month, especially during your peak time. That's a significant increase with a very minimal, on your income, with a very minimal increase on the camper side. And it's funny, for as many parks as I've converted, which I would say I'm probably going on 30 now, from being standard pricing to dynamic pricing, they always start out by saying, "Oh, our customer's going to be so mad. They're not going to like us. They're not going to come back." And I give them like 2 or 3 things they can say, and they've never had to use them ever, because they're just, first of all, people kind of got used to the prices going up during COVID, and so these were like, my conversions were mostly pre-COVID. Didn't need to convert during COVID and since COVID, and so it's they build up a fear that's just not there. And I do agree with Jeff on the rates. I know the rates have come up, but some of the research that we've looked at and things I've been hearing from my parks and consumers is that it's not about the rate, the 2 things right now. It's about our deposit policies and our cancellation policies. Just by shifting those a little bit, we can alleviate some of that anxiety, because they're realizing that, I can make a reservation and still get a percentage of my money back, or I can make a reservation and cancel and not lose everything just because I made the reservation and thought I was going to be there and things changed. So
it's interesting. I just saw an article talking about how the majority of short-term campers cancel or no-show at least a handful of times a year, or a portion of their bookings per year. And I'm curious on insights around, how valuable, I understand it's the kind of necessity, obviously, behind having those policies in place, but how valuable is it to be adaptable or make those policies more malleable, to address this consumer dynamic where booking windows are shortening, folks are kind of concerned about the weather or wildfire season or whatever, and hesitant to make a booking. Does a creative, malleable cancellation policy motivate an earlier booking because they feel a bit more flexibility?
It absolutely does. And there are some really innovative things that we're seeing happening. I've got one owner, she owns 13 parks, and she started with a membership. So if you're a member of her park, kind of similar to like what KOA did, but a little different, because she took a different twist. So she basically said, if you're a member, then you have a different cancellation policy and a different refund policy. And her background was banking before she got into RVs. And so what she did was she calculated the percentage of people that were going to cancel and figured out, all right, on average, kind of like when you're doing an amortization schedule, right? How much would you need to make to be able to cover all that? Because there is some concern on Park's side. They do need to make sure that they're not holding that spot for somebody who's ultimately not going to show up and want their money back. I mean, that's their asset. They held it for you. So I totally can stand behind them on their policies. But she's finding that she is doing really well with that. And because she has multiple parks where people can go different places, not only does she say, look, you can you get a better cancellation policy and you get a better refund policy, you can actually transfer your reservation to another location if the weather is not great where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I just feel like there's a lot of things that can be done to make that more, palliative for the guests.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. We are seeing some unique stuff happening up here as well, that I think is going to help address that kind of consumer hesitancy to book farther in advance. I love to see that innovation from campground owners, no question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was funny early on, like we had the growth, we had higher occupancy pre-COVID, but then during COVID, it just kind of skyrocketed. And everybody in my family is a camper. So, I mean, when we go, we look like a rally, right? When we go camping together.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious because all of the younger people in my family that were camping, no joke, they would make reservations at 3 different campgrounds for the exact same week because to them, back then, the cancellation policy was $25.
Yeah.
And so they would say, we don't know where we want to go. So they book all 3 and sacrifice the $50 to get to where they wanted to go. And so I think, having that too low a cancellation policy encouraged some of the activity we were seeing. And now we're just kind of riding that. So we can't be too flexible, but we need to be more flexible than we are right now because those policies that we had during COVID they changed during COVID, we put into place for exactly that kind of activity.
Right.
Sandy and Scott, I just wonder how you feel about the option to have cancellation insurance purchased with your reservation. I've been recommending that at some where they're more of a high volume and longer stay. And a couple of them we've written, it's not through an insurance company. We just wrote the policies through. The other is there is an insurance company out there that for a percentage will write the insurance for cancellations. I didn't know how you guys felt about the future of that to kind of address the cancellation issue.
I think it's brilliant, and I think it's unique to each park. I think they need to look at what their transitory traffic is because it doesn't work for every park. But I've got one park that's in the panhandle of Florida. He underwrites all of this himself. He has a cancellation policy, which it's an insurance policy, right, that they can buy. He's got a weather insurance policy. And then he also he self-finances packages. So he happens to be a larger park. And so to help younger people, he takes the whole idea of the cruise, right? He'll say, okay, if you want to come to my location and it's going to cost $700 for your site rental, and then you want $200 worth of food credits, and you want to rent a fire pit, and you want to rent a golf cart, and you want X number on your drinks. You package all that together. Maybe it comes to $2,000. He then divides that in equal payments based off of how far it is till the time they come. So if they're booking 6 months in advance, he divides it by 6. They make a monthly payment so that by the time they get there, everything is paid for. And it is brilliant and it's working for him. But because he created his own little side company over here to do that, they are signing an agreement to pay this amount. So there's no refunds ever. You can't get a refund. He still however, move your date for you. So, or you can transfer that to someone else. So it's, I mean, he's in an area where there's a lot of military. So they do have going and coming. But we've been able to figure out that if somebody is leaving that's already had a reservation and now they can't take it, there's somebody that's coming in, they can usually sell it to. And so we just changed the names. And so these are all really creative ways that I think parks are finding to deal with ancillary and some of this stuff.
Jump in briefly. I think there are creative ways. I think that's great, and you should do that. For example, hotels have been doing things for a long time. I don't know why we're behind the scheme on that. I would caution to be very careful of calling any of this insurance. You cannot call this insurance in most places because there are insurance regulations. So you cannot. I've looked into it for some people. Do not call it insurance. And if you notice, hotels who offer kind of cancellation insurance, it's not usually through them. It's through a different third party for this very reason. So please feel free to do something that acts as trip insurance, but please don't call it insurance, because unless you are some kind of registered licensed insurance company, you are not allowed to offer insurance. So do not call it insurance. You can do something very similar, but language matters, and I don't want you to think you're doing something nice for your guests and get in trouble. So don't do that.
Agreed. I was going to ask, because our insurance industry in Canada is so regulated.
It's actually the same here, Cara. It's just most people don't know that. So do not use the word insurance unless a third party unless you've hooked up with a third party insurance company, whatever that is, like Lions or something like that, that's offering it, and you're not. If you're going to offer it internal house, it's not insurance. Come up with another cute name like Rainy Day Go Away. I don't care, but do not call it insurance.
That's why we keep you on the call, Christine.
Exactly.
Keep us honest.
I love that we have to sit here to keep us all straight.
Yeah.
Well, it's because everyone is trying to come up with something creative, and I don't think it's bad. Like, I'll be closer to your neck of the woods this summer, Cara. I'm going to visit my husband's family in Canada again, and every time we do that, we have the back and forth about, oh, should we buy the trip insurance? Oh, do I pay for everything up front? Are we sure we're going to go 3 months from now? It's the same thing, and nobody bats an eye at it for flights or hotels or anything else. So, I pay more. I pay less if I want it to be non-refundable. I pay more if I want it to be refundable. And I think that's a model we can for sure adopt. I like that one. I would love to do that. Like, hey, if you want this to remain refundable, then you need to pay me another $50. And if you don't want it to be refundable, I'll give you a $50 discount, which is fine because it's not insurance. So we're good to go on that one.
I'm curious about, we have some challenges on the insurance front up here in Canada that has members kind of bringing some necessity to the association to look at, some inherent risk legislation and impacting some of that. Currently, our specific industry doesn't really have any protection from inherent risk. The amusement park industry and the ski industry and things like that all have those things in place. So I've kind of been down a bit of a rabbit hole doing some research on some of this as we prepare to add this to our advocacy work. But I think some states have been able to achieve this. I don't know if any of you can speak to it, but can you give some insight into maybe how valuable that is? Or is there data about, does this protect parks in those states in a way that the parks in other states are struggling with?
Well, it protects. So if we use an industry that has them, so like there's a lot of states that have inherent risk in equine activities. That's one where it has been a lot before, and it does protect in the sense that it acts as a deterrent. But what an inherent risk law does is essentially makes a waiver stronger, or makes you kind of in the same place if you never got a waiver, in the sense that you were telling the people up front that the activity they're participating in is inherently risky. So it goes to the contributory part of the case. So if skydiving is something we should all understand is inherently dangerous, right? And, but they still have you sign a bajillion things because they're trying to tell you up front, if you choose to partake in this activity, you might get hurt. I warned you, this isn't a requirement. You don't have to jump out of an airplane. You're choosing to do so. So if you get hurt while doing it, you knew up front you had the chance to not participate in that activity and you did anyway. So that lessens some of my liability. So by having these inherent risk laws, we get to start from that place. Like, as a matter of law, we define this activity as something that is inherently dangerous or that there's an inherent risk to it. So again, you don't have to camp. It's a privilege, not a requirement, and you chose to partake in it, even knowing that as a matter of law, it's risky. So if you got hurt while doing it, your claim is kind of worth less because the thing was still risky. Now, what lawyers are going to do with that is they're going to be like, cool, get that, but wow, Cara, you never cut your shrubs ever, and this pathway got completely overgrown. So there's a negligence piece to it as well. So yeah, the activity is dangerous, but you made it worse. So, it cuts it off somewhere. It's not going to make the lawsuits go away. It's going to make recovery less because they'll, as a matter of law, have to share in the kind of like, you chose to do this anyway type of argument.
That's good insight. I wonder, is in maybe some of the others can speak to this portion. Does, in the states where there are inherent risk legislation in place, is insurance coverage for campgrounds more accessible and better priced, more competitively priced?
Well,
I
Ohio,
when it passed.
I was going to say, I had a
in
talk
Ohio
about
when it passed, I didn't see a big difference.
We're in a national pool, Cara. That's what happens. So we get pooled together with everybody. So unless we had some kind of federal thing that caused everyone to come down, I don't truly see there being a massive difference. Because
that makes sense.
All kind of still insured by the same very few carriers.
Yeah. Okay.
Cara, how we, because what we did was take Wisconsin's draft and start working with it.
Yeah.
And then met with a lot of the people that would be interested in the bill. The big one is the Association of Liability Attorneys, or whatever you want to call them, the litigators. Once we got them to actually agree and sign off, because in the end, it's pretty much what Christina said, they'll always find something they can sue you for if they want to. But it does give the owner of the campground a warm and fuzzy feeling that on stupid things, they can always say, look, we have this, liability coverage that says there's things inherent in camping, like you tripping over a tree root. I can't solve that. But, if it's something I did that would cause the injury, I can still be sued. But if you want to start it in Canada, I would, get a draft of one that's been passed and then work with the trial attorneys. That's going to be your main competition against it.
Maybe I'll follow up with you, Jeff.
Okay.
Pick your brain a little bit.
I was going to say that, and a lot of committees, and
yeah, the committees.
It was fun.
I bet. Yeah, no, it's, obviously really valuable. And I apologize. I segued the whole conversation to insurance. I lit up when that happened because it's so on my plate right now. Specific to that, I think it's an obvious necessity, but, we're also trying to balance members' best interests and help them have support in whatever ways they can. I'm curious to know, Christine, are there any kind of hot button legal things happening right now? Stuff that's on your radar that's new or
same old? No, to some degree, it is the same old things. But what it is things have ramped up. So I have a lot of employment lawsuits right now, like a lot of them, current employees, former employees. I'm going to be honest, it's because notoriously campground owners did a bad job of paying and treating employees as the correct classifications. And because we're in what I would call an economically strained period, people like to assume that campground owners have deep pockets. So if you still haven't updated how you're paying your employees to fit your local laws, state, country, whatever, take a look at that. That one's still important. But it does mean an increase in what I call like 5K go away injury suits, like I slipped and fell, the tree root, as Jeff said, like those type of things have increased because again, it's all these quick kind of money grabs. The one thing I would flag that was in our attention about 5 years ago, but we've stopped paying attention to is kind of those ADA lawsuits. Now, in 2019, we talked a lot about the websites. That technically still hasn't gone away. So that's still a thing in the U.S. But the ADA has a lot of other pieces to it, and more people are getting hit. I used to call them kind of like drive-by lawsuits. So for like any building, they drive by and see there wasn't a ramp, and then they'd send you something. The thing is that campgrounds, now having been clearly defined as public accommodations under that law, are subject to all of that, which means if you have rental units, you need to make sure you have one. I call it like the hotel method. Like you go to a hotel and they have so many rooms that are handicap compliant with the ADA. We have to do similarly. So if you're putting in a bunch of new cabins, you should think about putting in one that's ADA compliant. I mean, it goes all the way down to mini golf courses, and I'm being fully transparent. I don't think I know a single campground that has a mini golf course that's ADA compliant. But if you have 18 holes, half of them, 9 of them are supposed to be ADA compliant, and there's a whole set of rules for that. So I flag that because I think we took it off our radar for a while because it wasn't that hot button, but I know that it's still there and could still happen. So I just want people to pay attention to that from a lawsuit perspective, and just as a, hey, if you happen to be that rare campground that's accessible, it's going to drive you a lot of extra business because there are very few that are. So maybe, we don't think of it so much as a negative having to comply with these kind of accessibility requirements, but a positive that we have a whole new marketing thing and very little competition in that arena.
I actually had a park in Texas that was just, they filed a lawsuit against them because their RV site was not ADA compliant. Now, this park had nothing except RV sites. Their bathroom was ADA compliant. Their office was ADA compliant. And the couple still filed a lawsuit against them. And what was so nice was they won in 15 minutes in front of the judge because the site actually met all the qualifications of having enough space for a vehicle to pull up next to it and for a wheelchair and all this kind of stuff. The problem was the RV itself was not ADA compliant. So the judge came back and said, how can you expect us to have a site that's ADA compliant when you yourself, your rig is not ADA compliant? And so it took they were really scared because it took 3 months to get it on the docket, right? And so
that's quick, Sandy. Well, most of my litigation suits are 18 months. So
yeah, well,
3 months is quick.
Well, I was going to say 3 months to get it into court, right, was scary enough for them. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. The other thing I've seen happening a lot more lately, and I don't know that any lawsuits have come out of this, but all the states have different periods of time for how long you can stay without being considered a resident.
Yeah.
And if they can get away with it and they can tell, they can sweet talk that person at the guest who doesn't know the rules and regulations. Oh, such and such happened. Can I stay just one more week? Right. And that one more week puts them over the 180 days or whatever that is. Then game on. And they're there for 6 months and they're not paying a penny. And we've seen, I know of at least 10 situations that are happening right now.
Well, what it does is it just boots you into the traditional landlord-tenant category. So there's still a mechanism to remove them. It's just not my favorite one. It just means that you've converted yourself into a mobile home park or an apartment complex or whatever comparatively. So, I still get to evict them. It's just now I have to evict them, whereas when I was at campground, I didn't have to. I mean, this is more of a problem in warmer climates where they're open year round than it is in northern climates when we close, because I won a couple lawsuits about this. I had a campground that was open 11 months a year. So they closed 1 month, just January. And we won our lawsuit because the judge determined that we could never be housing because there was no actual ability to stay there 12 months a year. So they would have to go somewhere else and have somewhere else to live. So in the Northeast, I tell people who try to stay open all year long to weigh the economic return versus the possible downside of being considered a landlord. Unfortunately, in the South, every park's open year round. So, that's why you tend to run into those issues. But, it stinks to be put into that category, but just to flag, there still is a process to remove them. You're just like every other landlord then is what it is.
I'm glad we brought this subject up because I'm trying to work with the state of Ohio because each judge rules differently.
Sure.
And we even have some prosecutors that won't even take it to the court.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is set up a meeting with the Ohio Attorney General to sit down and come up with what rules apply and how they apply so that we can hit the front desk. So when the police officer or whomever comes out, we can point to the section and code of how we're asking to have those people removed. So that, because most police officers do not, I hate to say it, but they don't know the laws any different from a campground to a normal eviction.
Well, I hate to be the doom and gloom character. It is.
That's your job, Christine.
But my problem is that in states where I have very robust guidance and even statutes, I still have struggled to have either local law enforcement do it correctly or even the judges to agree correctly. And where that leaves me is, again, there is a mechanism, but nobody wants to do it because the economic burden. So that's dragging one of these institutions, whether it's law enforcement or the judge or something, to be like, you're doing something wrong. And then also is a terrible hit on the goodwill. So nobody wants to go above their law enforcement's head or piss off their local judge and drag them through a court, even if they are wrong, because they still have to operate their business in that area. And until I get in all of these states someone willing to sue the local government, I'm going to have a lot of problems in getting them,
That's one of the reasons I wanted to go to the AG of Ohio so that I can have his opinion of the laws on top of it.
But it doesn't, they still, so I guess the reason courts have an appellate system is because they don't always get it right at the bottom level. Yeah. And that's been my unfortunate sticking point in a multitude of states, is that even with opinions, even with someone who should have credit, I've had completely different interpretations across the states over and over again. And because again, we're, a place that lets municipalities have different laws and states have different laws. I really think it's going to take to a big old lawsuit and putting some economic pressure on the governments to defend it to get a unified decision all the time. That's my doom and gloom, only because I thought it would get better since more laws came out over the last 4 years, and it really hasn't.
I would say that's a bit doom and gloomy for me, as we are definitely, despite the climate impact or component up here, we absolutely are facing this challenge in several areas of the country. I'm also in a dynamic where many more urban locations are financially motivating campgrounds to stay open year-round to address a significant and extreme housing crisis.
Housing issue,
So this is putting members in a position where they're being motivated to function in that way, and they often don't have the awareness or education to understand the long-term or potential implications of making that business operations choice, and what that may mean for them long term. So now we're facing this dynamic where they've got folks that, again, won't leave. They're having to go through eviction process as a landlord when they had no intention of ever being one. We have been trying to address this from a industry education standpoint. At this point, we're kind of creating a guide and working with lawyers to generate some really firm, hopefully pretty solid license to occupy terminology that really limits any possibility for them to claim, as tenants. But it in many cases, it continues to come down to that length of stay component, which is getting really challenging in this environment. And so, we're trying to create this guide and all these resources for members to try to educate them to make their own business decisions with every piece of information. It's one thing as an operator, and I mean, I have members who choose to stay open year round and some of them have tenants in British Columbia where the climate is temperate. Some of them have clients who've been in the park for 10 straight years. And so those individuals, I think, are making a choice, provided they have all the information, to function in a way that they are classified as a landlord in that case, in that instance. But to provide the information and awareness to members at large, I think is valuable and certainly a good role for the association. But your doom and gloom is there for sure in terms of impacting any sort of. I think it would be ideal to see some kind of case precedent set, which we are seeing in some areas of the country, to help us with the whole conversation. But I'm not confident that we'll ever get to a place where there's a streamlined set of specific criteria to help.
I think you're right. I think it's very difficult. So New York's a big state, right? So I have two ones that stick out most to me. Is I have a campground that in their location, and again, they didn't want to push back for a host of reasons. The judge determined that they had to give the people an additional 18 months to get off their property. 18 months. So that was supposed to only be a seasonal that was there May through October. And they had to let them in their unit stay for another 18 months. And they were like, you know what, Chrissy, it's just not worth it to us. Like, we'll just follow that judge's order and, we won't poke it anymore. But there's no precedent for that judicial decision, because even in like regular landlord tenant law, never has a judge been like, oh, you have to give that person a year and a half to move out. No, that's ridiculous. So my problem is that, there are all these laws, there's these opinions. I can do things till I'm blue in the face, but, like anything else, until there's a more of a push, whether it's an economic because they don't want to get hit with it, or a PR or something that really makes it nasty for the people making those decisions, I'm not sure that I'm ever going to be able to say with 100%. And what it's doing is causing, campgrounds to creatively remove people in ways that could get them in trouble. So, I have a campground who cut off the utilities to somebody because, and because that judge then determined that person was really a tenant, that campground owner now has a felony because you can't turn off utilities to tenants. So, my concern really is that I don't know that there's a wand I can wave to make it better. And we've just been, over the last surely 4 years, seeing how it shook out so differently in every location and every case and every campground. And there's nothing uniform. And as an attorney, that makes me incredibly uncomfortable, because I would love to be like, hey, this is the law, this is what we do, we're all on the same page, and we're just not there yet.
How do you feel about what just got passed in North Carolina? Have you read that? I'll
need a little more than that. just passed like in the last few weeks. No, I have not read it. Passed in the last year, maybe.
Yeah. No, they actually passed a uniform type code for removals.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, a lot of states have that type of thing. I mean, in New York, our code went into effect in 2020. Pennsylvania hooked up with the hotel code. That was in 2020. Vermont has always had something like there. My problem is that it hasn't, and I hate to say this, it hasn't mattered. What it has done for me is deterred what I would call like a private lawsuit. So I try to remove somebody, they hire an attorney who comes and yells at my client, who's like, you can't do it, it's housing. And then I go to that attorney and go, you're wrong, there's this law. And then they go away. So it's helped me get rid of those lawsuits. What it hasn't helped me with is getting the law enforcement to remove the people or uniformly convince the judge that this isn't housing. So I've still been dragged to court over these things. So I can't say that like they'll ever necessarily go all the way I want them to because of that piece. But it does help deter the private lawsuit. So like my attorney's gonna send you a letter, kind of tantrum that people were throwing. I have gotten rid of those and gotten less of those. It hasn't helped me as much in the court system because I say the worst part of my job is people because people are unpredictable. So that judge might have had the worst camping experience in their life and hate campgrounds and just, blanket decide that they aren't going to do anything. Or maybe they're worried about the housing crisis, as Cara said, and our team force everybody to be a landlord. And I'm just stuck with their individual interpretation.
I just never realized how bad it was out there, depending on the judge or the county or the sheriff.
Yep.
Every person.
Because I've always had good working relationships with them.
I mean, our campgrounds too. I've had no problem removing people, and I've never had an issue. Knock on wood. But county over, that campground's getting destroyed. So
since I took over as president of the Ohio Campground Owners, I've run into telling a law director that they had no idea what they were talking about, and they don't like that. And then I have a judge that just refuses to hear the cases. He won't even let them file to do it. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. There's rules.
Where we run into that, what I was just saying is that the next step is then I have to drag that judge's decision to another court or that law enforcement's decision somewhere else, but I'm not physically moving my business. So I don't really want to do that in the sense that that's just creating ill will between us, that you're never going to be on my side because now I got you admonished by, your mom, if you will, in the system, and you're never going to like me after that. So that ends up being the balance, is that no campground owner wants to fight with their local government because that's a forever issue after that.
Well, and I think part of the problem goes back to the campground owner to begin with, because they need to decide what kind of business are they operating.
Yes.
If they want that to be a long-term stay park, then they need to look at what the laws are about what kind of dwellings can go into that park. Because if you look at any RV that was produced by the RV industry, there is a sticker on it that says this is a recreational vehicle and is not designed for staying in long term, right? And so you've got somebody in an RV, right, in your park, but you are allowing them to live there year round. You're breaking the laws, right? You're facilitating it. And so one of the biggest pet peeves I have and the biggest problems I have is, as an RV industry as a whole, we want to lump them together. In so many states, there's no difference between a long-term stay park and a transient park. And those numbers get mixed with our numbers, and we never know really where we are. It's kind of interesting with all the different hotels interested in the RV industry now. They bring to it a different perspective. And so when I start having conversations with them and say, oh no, when we have a significant number of parks where 60% of the time somebody is living there year round, they get this look on their face like, what? And so they don't understand that. They want to know well, how many of them. They looked at some of our numbers from different people and they said, wait a minute, how do I know which ones are long-term stay and which ones are transient? And I said, you can't. There's no way to know. You're getting numbers rolled up. As long as they say they're an RV park or a campground, their numbers are getting rolled into all of this data. And so we have to figure that out as an industry. Now, I don't know, in Canada, it may be different. The laws may be different, you know, and you may be in a better place, but we're definitely not right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we're in a very similar position, but we're also in a dynamic. My ex-husband, who still owns the campground I used to own, had his own municipality come to him and say, this municipality issues him an operating permit that says you can only host a guest for 180 maximum days in a calendar year. This year, the municipality came to him and said, there's a massive housing crisis and all these people have nowhere to go. So we'd like for you to stay open for the winter. You will waive that portion of your operating permit. And, I can see as an operator that suddenly, your revenue generation opportunity is doubled all of a sudden. You have 12 months instead of 6 and all those things. But, when him and I sat down and talked about it, I said to him, there's a significant amount of potential negative repercussion that could last long term.
Right.
And at any time, if the county at some point decides they want to go back to their old ways, now you're on the hook to deal with all of these folks who've been staying there for, at that point, who knows how long.
Right.
It completely changes the kind of vibe and the feel of the property and the place. You really have to, as an operator, be really conscious about all of the potential outcomes of making a choice to kind of shift your business in that way. And, I think there's there's obviously a place for it, especially right now. There's demand for it. I've a municipality out in Halifax in Nova Scotia that paid a campground to stay open for the winter. They covered their water and garbage and, municipal services to help house these people. But now it's springtime and this campground wants to open for their season and those individuals don't want to leave.
Yeah.
So, there's all kinds of potential outcomes. Like Christine said, people are unpredictable and you can't know exactly how that's always going to go. It's really concerning right now for our industry here. And also, Sandy, the component of the RV seasonality and all of that, I think the RV industry is really, trying to be cognizant of making sure that their product is understood and used in a safe way.
Right.
And the challenge there is the consumer. I was talking with one of our lawyers we've been talking to about our license to occupy resources and all of that. And I asked, is there any sort of precedent set around the fact that these RVs themselves are not technically, coded compliant to live in? Would that impact a judge's decision? And she said, no. She said, you can set every rule you possibly want. But if the consumer is doing it, is choosing to do it, and a campground operator is choosing to host them to do it,
right,
it doesn't matter what the code says. The RV industry can set all kinds of intention, but the actual use, the intent of use, is different than the actual use outcome.
Right. Yeah.
And that's concerning. It needs to be considered in the decision.
Yeah, I've got 2 park owners that are doing creative things. Christine, I don't know if this is the best legal idea. Okay, I'm just going to tell you what I've seen. So, but I've got one park that's in the panhandle of Florida, and his rule is that you are welcome to come and stay with him for as long as you want to stay, but every 28 days you have to leave for 48 hours. So you have to pull your rig off, go somewhere else, and then you can come back and you can stay another 28 days. And he also rotates you on a different site. So as long as he can do it. Then I've got another part that's in Central Florida, And I just thought he was brilliant when he did this. He bought up 6 parks, all within about 50 miles of each other. Primarily, all he handles is seasonal guests. You know, the snowbirds come down. But what he did was he said that if you're coming to stay with me, you can come and stay with me for 6 months, but you're staying with me as a park system. He makes them move every month into a different one of his 6 parks. And they're not far enough away that people go, oh, this is terrible. And he lets them move in groups because the most important thing to them was their people that they traveled with. And so in that way, he's avoiding, in Florida, it's 180 days. The minute you get to 181 days, right, then you're a resident. And so I think these are 2 ways that they're really creatively trying to handle, right? Still being open, still being there for the guest, but the other benefit to that is when people have to move, they don't build their kingdom, right? Yeah. They don't put out all the garbage and the tchotchkes that say, this is my place and I live here, right? And so it keeps that park looking like it's transitory so that the other guests don't come in and go, oh my gosh, half these people live here. This isn't I'm looking for my kind of people, right? The campers. So I thought they were pretty creative in the way they were handling it.
Mileage may vary. That's a state-by-state thing. I caution only because in some states they will aggregate the time that person is there. So when your person making them move 28 days, they don't care. They'll be like, okay, well, that's 28 plus 28 plus 28 plus 28. Oh, that's 181. So I flag that. Be very careful depending on the state you're in, because in some states they aggregate all that time and it wouldn't matter.
Well, in Florida, it is not. They don't aggregate them, and it can't just be 24 hours, which is why it's 48.
See, at least I think that's the key here, is kind of knowing the law that's applicable to you, and if you can be innovative in a way that meets guest expectation and consumer need, but also satisfies the regulatory expectations. The challenge for sure comes in cases where a municipality flips on their head and says they want to do the opposite thing now. But staying on top of that stuff is valuable, and I think a good reason to kind of have a great lawyer and all those things in your back pocket. I know we're getting close to the end, and I just wanted to ask Scott, we touched a little bit on the ADA accessibility stuff. You did that fabulous report last year. Is that going to be an annual thing? Are we going to build out reporting on that every year?
It looks like it. At least maybe not always quite as extensive, but it's something that we're still measuring. We have new data on. That issue, just as an aside, I don't want to say it as an aside, but a member of my family is disabled in a wheelchair, and he says that he's a very avid camper. His advice to any campground owner is, aside from the ADA compliance, sit in a wheelchair and try to access the things.
Hang out in your park in a wheelchair.
In your park. Just do it. He's like, go to the kitchen. Like if it's a cabin, go to the kitchen in a wheelchair. He try to get out of the bed and out of the bathroom, all those things. That's the advice he gives, because he's like, you can be ADA compliant, but sometimes it's not that useful.
Yeah, I think that the actual tangible experience itself is eye-opening. Do you in the reporting, Scott, are you guys tracking? Do you have any idea or measure of how many parks offer ADA compliant amenities and spaces? Or do we have a number?
We don't in our work. It's to be honest with you, in some of the work we've done, there's kind of a drop off and lack of awareness. It's spotty, like some parts of the park maybe, but it's not fully converted. So I would say there's a decent number of park owners who don't know, like especially if they're new owners, that they don't know. It's not the question they asked when they bought the park.
But new park developers that are coming from the commercial side are very aware of it. They just may not know all the details, but they know that when they're building a commercial mini strip, that what has to be outside ADA compliant. When you go into those buildings, right, is the bathroom going to be ADA compliant? And so a lot of your newer parks, you will find that not only are they ADA compliant, but they've gone overboard with the ADA compliance to the standard, right? To the ADA standard. They've done more. And so I do think we're seeing more and more in some of with the newer commercial investments.
And then, sorry, one more question for Scott. We were talking about seasonal versus short-term stay parks. When you're doing your North American camping report and all that, are you capturing anything to compare those two demographics of the consumer industry?
We can. We have that information. So we don't always, there's so many data points they don't always kind of make it out there, but we have those data points. If anyone's interested, please. And you are. So yes, we can talk about that. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm actually shocked that an hour flew by so quickly, and we covered some doom and gloom, but some good positive things too. I'm really excited on this kind of big momentous day here in Canada. May 1st, campgrounds are opening day. For another good season. I think we talked about some of the concerns around reservations and how those things are looking, but I'm positive and so hopeful that we have a really great weather year, and that things are going to go wonderfully for us up here this summer. I know you guys have a different dynamic with your snowbirds are. Well, a good friend of mine just came home yesterday, was snowbirding all winter. So they're heading back this way. But I'm excited for another camping season and so grateful for you guys and your time today. It was great to catch up with you all. I loved seeing all of you in Denver in October and hope I can catch up with you guys again sometime before the fall.
Excellent.
All right.
Catching up.
Thanks.
You did a great job, Kim.
Thanks so much for your time today, guys.
Okay.
Nice having you back.
All right.
Thanks. Hi, Brian.
Yes, hi, Brian. We missed you.
Yeah. Okay. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
For this episode of MC Fireside Chats with your host, Brian Searl. Have a suggestion for a show idea? Want your campground or company in a future episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Get your daily dose of news from moderncampground.com. And be sure to join us next week for more insights into the fascinating world of outdoor hospitality.